What is going on, everybody? Welcome to AWS On Air Sports. My name is Nick Betts from AWS. We dive into different sports leagues every other week and talk about how technology and specifically cloud computing is changing the game for all these different sports. Today, we've got the Bundesliga run by the DFL out of Germany, the pro soccer league in Germany for the Americans watching that might not know what the Bundesliga is. Whether they call it soccer or football, we've got a lot of fun stuff to talk about today. We're going to be talking to people directly from the DFL and the Bundesliga about how technology has kind of been changing their game, changing how coaches, players, and the league office operates, changing how the game looks to you as fans, and then also talking with some AWS folks about how we make all of this possible. So drop a comment in. We'll be watching the comments all day. Shout out to Debbie, my somewhat tolerable manager that runs the comment sections for us. Give her a shout out there. Let us know your favorite football team, your favorite soccer team. And if you have any questions over the course of the show, drop them in the chat. We'll try to answer them as best as we can. So before we get rolling here, our first guest is Lucas Rosnovich from the DFL. That's the parent team or parent company, I guess, that runs the Bundesliga. So let's bring him in here. Let's do the intro. What's going on, Lucas? Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Nick. It's great to be here, and thanks for having us.
Yeah, I've been really looking forward to this episode. The Bundesliga is kind of at the forefront of a lot of changes happening in football right now, so I'm excited to dive into that with you guys, with match facts, with all the different changes you're making to broadcasting that impacts us as fans watching, I think without even us knowing, at least without me knowing until 2 weeks ago. But before we get into all of that, Lucas, I know you're the head of digital innovation for the DFL. Can you give everybody a little bit more insight as to what that means?
Of course. And once again, thanks for having us. It's great to be part of that show and share basically our league perspective. Really excited to do so. I'm Lucas, head of digital innovation. What does that mean? It means that I look across our media value chain, and we're going to dive into that media value chain a couple of minutes later. And what I do is I look at technologies together with our technology partners, such as AWS, and we look at how can we enhance the broadcasting experience, how can we enhance the fan experience, how can we be more scalable, more flexible, more cost-effective through technology, and we look at it and try to create the most innovative and probably one of the best sport products out there.
Perfect. And what's the relationship between the DFL and the Bundesliga? That's something that I didn't know. Like, that's something I feel like a lot of fans, at least on our side of the pond, don't know. So what's that?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question, because the Bundesliga, as the top tier league of German professional football, it's the Bundesliga, and the second league has been around for 60 years now. We're actually celebrating 60 years of Bundesliga this season, and which is a fantastic event, I think. And the DFL is the organizing body of the Bundesliga. So that's similar to what the NFL does or the NBA does in the US, is what we're doing in Germany. It's obviously always a little bit differently structured, but it's overall it's similar to each other. But as you said, the Bundesliga, or as I said, the Bundesliga is around for 60 years already. The DFL has been around for 23 years now. So the Bundesliga was basically founded by the German Football Association, so the DFB, who's also organizing the national team. And then in 2000, we became separate because we wanted to professionalize football. And it has been an innovation journey, basically, you can say, ever since. Because since then, we have created broadcasting in-house, we have created sports data in-house, we have created content and platforms in-house, and the distribution as well. And that's all possible basically through that foundation in 2000. And the DFL is trying to be on the forefront of innovation.
Awesome. Now, before we dive into all that innovation, I always like to ask this of all of our guests from these leagues, right? How did you get involved with the DFL? Because this sounds like my dream job in college. I feel like a lot of our viewers' dream job is working in the front office, their favorite sports league, right? So how did you get involved in this?
Well, as you said, right, it's the dream job when you're in college, But when you're a little kid, you want to be on the pitch, right? And of course, I wanted to be on the pitch as well. And I played football and was a big fan as well, and still am, because it starts with a passion, I think. But obviously, and needless to say, I wasn't good enough to be on the pitch now in the Bundesliga matches, which is a pity. But on the other hand, I tried to make the most of it and studied sports and worked in sports marketing, then in consultancy, and came to DFL first in DFL Digital Sports, and now in the DFL for Head of Digital Innovation. And it is a great job, and it's a lot of fun, of course.
Perfect. So I know we've got some other people coming in, maybe a few minutes late to the show. So just as a quick recap, everybody, my name's Nick Betts from AWS. I work for the on-air sports team. I'm here with Lucas Rosnovich from the DFL. That's the German, basically football overhead body. We're going to be talking today about how the DFL and the Bundesliga are changing the game of soccer and really trying to be kind of the spearhead of innovation in the beautiful game. So let's dive right into it, Lucas, right? What exactly is the history of the partnership between the DFL and the AWS? How did you guys get involved in this technology space? Because I know that you guys have a rich history of innovating in soccer dating back those 23 years the DFL has been in existence. So can you kind of give us our background info there?
Of course, a pleasure. And maybe first thing to note is that the partnership between DFL and AWS has been a success story. We're really happy to be partnering with you. Since January 2020, AWS has been our official technology provider when it comes to cloud computing, when it comes to machine learning and analytics. We have worked in several streams together and work across our whole media value chain together. It's really exciting. But it's important to say we've already started working with AWS before that. And why is that? Because, we were on-prem before. Nobody knows what on-prem means today because everybody's in the cloud. Yeah. But there was a time when we were on-prem and we were not really scalable, and we had some hiccups, and we were not happy with the system. So we explored clouds back then. And I think it was in 2018 when we started working on AWS. And AWS convinced us because the services, the competencies were just right for us. It worked so well. And so we engaged with you guys in talks about how can we create a more innovative product out of it? How does it benefit not only DFL, but also AWS? And from that, a natural partnership evolved in January 2020. And it has been a success story since 3.5 years now and counting.
Yeah. And I know we're going to be diving into a lot of different things with you today over the next 20 or so minutes about, the different projects we've taken on together. Can you kind of give our fans a sneak peek into the conversation? What all kind of projects do we work on? I know we've got some stuff with broadcasting. We've got some stuff that we see on the pitch itself. What are the broad topics we're going to cover?
Yeah, happy to do so. And I think what's really interesting is all the projects, they touch every step of our media value chain, which is from glass to glass. Yeah. And that means, on the one hand, we look at broadcasting. How can we enhance broadcasting, and how can we maybe change the technology behind broadcasting to make it more sustainable? How can we change the fan experience through a more personalized fan experience and through data? And then, of course, looking at match facts. That's what we're going to do today as well, because match facts are one of our core projects that we did together, an overall success story from how we can create the deeper understanding of the match through data in real time on air. That's really fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. And I know we've still got some people joining here asking. I think Lucas just summarized it perfectly. We're talking today about how the Bundesliga and DFL, that's kind of the parent federation for German soccer, is innovating the beautiful game with things like match facts that you see on your screen, and also this glass-to-glass and remote broadcasting strategy that Lucas just hinted at. So before we get to the match facts, I kind of want to start there, because from what I understand, this glass-to-glass strategy you mentioned is kind of the foundation of this new partnership in the cloud, right? So what is the glass-to-glass strategy?
So the glass-to-glass strategy, and I mentioned before that the DFL has kind of evolved from the organizing body through also, adding broadcasting in-house, sports data in-house, content production, and platforms in-house. That was all a strategic decision to own and control the media value chain, because the media value chain starts at the lens of the camera in the stadium, where we actually record all Bundesliga matches across all Bundesliga stadiums in Germany. And it starts there, and we have to own that step of the media value chain. And then it continues with sports data, and sports data is tracked automatically and manually, both through our joint venture with Sportech Solutions, who we have together with Delta Tray, and together with AWS, we do fantastic things there. And the tracking data is generated by camera technology, and we generate 3.6 million data points per match. And what can you do with it? So we're going to tap into match facts later, I know, but that's a really interesting fact, I think. And then we have content and distribution and content production, which is done in Cologne, Germany, at Digital Sports, and we actually produce the whole world feed that is distributed through every international broadcaster, ready to use. They can just take a signal, put it on air. It has all the graphics, it has all the commentators, and it's just pushed to them, and it's a fantastic product. And so we own it from the glass of the camera lens in the stadium to the camera lens or the device of the fan, which is also glass. That's why it's called glass to glass. And owning that and controlling that value chain is really important for us, because this separates us also from different or other sport leagues who have, probably some other vendors who do the broadcasting for them, which is fair and which you can do. But in terms of innovation speed, that whole partnership with AWS really relies on us to be able to innovate at rapid speed without having to approach another vendor who might, not have the same ideas about these innovations as we do. And so it really helps us just that we can do these innovations in-house. And it was a great strategic decision back then, I think.
Gotcha. Yeah. And that's kind of interesting. I didn't realize what's unique about this is that y'all basically own the entire process end to end, right? And I didn't realize that was a unique approach. I kind of thought that's how every league operated. So it's fascinating to me that y'all are the ones kind of in charge of that whole process. That's unique to the Bundesliga. And like you said, that would lead to a lot more innovation if you own the entire process. So I want to dive into real quick. I know we've got some comments asking about uses of the data and everything else coming in. We're going to get to that in just a second, guys. But before we do, kind of finish up this conversation about this glass to glass process. I think the most interesting thing to me as a fan is part of that process, right, is the broadcasting itself. And you mentioned in your intro that y'all are looking at remote broadcasting. And that was fascinating to me, obviously, as a streamer. So, can you go into a little bit more detail about what that is and kind of what that has entailed so far?
Yeah, happy to do so. And you mentioned something in the beginning where you said, hey, I don't even know if I realized it. And in a perfect world, of course, you wouldn't realize it if it's produced remotely or on site. And that's the goal. And that's where we want to go in the future and what we want to explore. And why do we do it? Because in the end, right now, to every Bundesliga match, a huge truck has to be sent with a lot of people working on site.
Yeah.
And there are now options through cloud that can handle that huge data capacity that is actually required in order to produce a Bundesliga match. So what we did is we tried to evaluate what kind of options do we have when producing in a central hub without actually being on site. Of course, camera is still on site, but then the signal can be pushed into the cloud and can be accessed from a central hub where we can then do the whole production, where the whole production unit would sit and then create the feed that would be the baseline for everything that we do afterwards. And that test was conducted this year and was a success. And we're going to continue to evaluate remote broadcasting because it has a lot of potential also when it comes to sustainability, for example.
Yeah, I think that's the main draw, I thought, for me when I was listening to it. I mean, it's obviously cool. Y'all can save on costs, I assume, not having to fly everything to every single match. But also just from the sustainability perspective, I'm sure that's going to cut down on a lot of emissions for those transports and make everything a lot more sustainable long term. So I think that's really cool. I know that's something that's really important in our world right now. So definitely wanted to highlight that before we get into these match facts. So with that, I think this is a good transition to get into those match facts that all of your fans know and love. I think we've got a quick intro for that. So let's see if we can get that rolling here. So that was kind of fast, but that shows you a lot of the different match facts we've innovated, right? As a viewer, I think it's really cool to be able to see things like keeper efficiency. I know y'all just came out with ball recovery time, like goal probabilities, all these things that, it lets you as a fan be able to trash talk other teams a little bit more. Like my guy scored with 10% chance right there. My keeper, is statistically like a better shot blocker than yours. So how are match facts changing the game from the league's perspective?
Yeah, and I agree. Match facts are one of my favorite examples in what we do together with AWS. And I wouldn't necessarily say that they change the game, but I think they really enhance it. And I think that's so great because in the end, what we try to do together with AWS, we try to serve our three customers, which is the fan, of course. It is the club because clubs are our shareholders, and then and clubs and players, and then it's partners, international broadcasters or commercial partners, and we try to serve these three groups. And not always we can serve with every project all of these three target groups, but if we can, and I think match facts are the perfect examples where we actually can serve these groups because they, for the fan, they tell the better story, they tell the deeper story that I couldn't understand before because the data was not available to me to digest or understand it. I mean, what can I do with 3.6 million data points per match? As a fan, if I just see them in an Excel sheet, not really helpful, I think. But if I can in real time say, hey, the goal that just been scored is, just 3% chance that it's scored because of the angle it was scored from, because of the defenders in front of him, the position of the goalkeeper, the distance to the goal. So that's a real cool story and something that is part of our broadcast now, and everybody kind of demands it already. And it's only been out there for 2.5 years, I think.
Yeah.
And you talked about the new match facts like keeper efficiency. I mean, keeper efficiency for the keepers and for the clubs. It's really interesting to see. Well, was my keeper? Was it just a regular day for them? Was it a bad or a really good day? Because when you just look at the score sheet and you see, oh, there's he didn't concede any goals. But maybe he didn't even have to concede any goals because the expected saves, which is the baseline for that, was also very low. But you could also see if it's an overperformance because he should have conceded 5, 6, 7 goals. He only conceded 1 or 2. So I think it tells you also the greatest story when it comes to sports performance. So for the clubs and for the media partners, when you look at ball recovery time, for example, so the speed of which another the club actually regains possession of the ball, it tells the better story about the strategy, and you can really incorporate that in your broadcasting signal. So I think match facts, I love them because they serve all three customers, and I love to see them on air.
Yeah, I got to say the keeper efficiency one I was real excited for. Way back when 6-year-old Nick was a all-star goalkeeper in his mind. And I feel like there's not usually a lot of kind of stats and things to back up keeper scores. A lot of people focus on goals and forwards. And like you said, it's cool now to be able to see, those 5 saves aren't as hard as these 5 saves. Like it's a way different game. So really cool to see. And as we're getting into kind of how these are used, right? Like it's obviously helping fan interaction. We've got a comment here from one of our viewers asking how much of this data is shared and used with individual teams, and kind of how, going off of that too, how quickly is that shared? Is that something that's instantaneous? Is that like they get a report a week later? How does that work for your teams?
No, thanks to AWS, it's shared in real time. And that's, I think, the cool case. We have a special data and analytics hub that is provided to the clubs in real time, so they can actually also make in-game decisions and use it also for post-game and pre-game. We also provide them with a pre-game report about their next opponent, and that's what we obviously deliver for all clubs because we want to be fair as a league. We our objective, of course, and so we provide that to all the clubs. And through the match analysis hub, that's where the clubs can access the data and see all the details about not only match facts but all performance data, because we track, as I said, all the player movements, every event. And an event is something like a free kick or any like a tackle is an event. So that's everything is tracked, the distance they run, the speed at which they run in. So it's a lot of data that we provide to the clubs.
Yeah, and that's really cool. So that could potentially change somebody's kind of halftime strategy if a coach gets a really interesting metric or something that they want to change. It's cool that's available to them in that moment. So that kind of feeds into another question we're getting a lot of with use cases and kind of how. I'm not going to just put up any ones. We're getting a lot of questions about it. Like, our teams, what's different now about these match facts being available so quickly than it maybe was 15, 20 years ago, right? Like, what's the major difference you see with that?
Oh, it's hard to say when it comes to the teams, because we obviously don't really know how their strategy behind the scenes work, because it's obviously their secret. But what we know is that players now really check their Bundesliga match facts and also check, the keeper efficiency. We know from keepers, we know from strikers that is something that they look at now. And I talked to one of our Bundesliga legends, Roman Weidenfeller, famous keeper, at this year's DFL Super Cup, and he said, like, back in 2008, 2009, nobody was using data for keepers. Nobody was doing that.
Yeah.
And then it started with, even for the keepers to understand how much did they run, because they also have to be a critical part of the game. And players like Manuel Neuer changed also the keeper game, and they really are in the part of the every possession basically nowadays.
Yeah.
So I think providing data for every position and for every player is really critical for their decision making.
Definitely. And yeah, like you said, it's just really cool that we're suddenly able to unlock all these new things and kind of advance the game in that way. And the fact that I'm just imagining players trash talking amongst themselves about who's got the best match facts from that week. So let's get in then. Kind of went over use cases. I'm also curious, how are these things actually made? So, like, when you talk about as a league office, you're sitting there, you're thinking, okay, how are we going to make these match facts? What match facts should we focus on, right? Like, what's the process of actually bringing these from ideation to the customer on the screen, to the fans on the screen?
So thanks to our partnership with AWS, actually, we have really initiated that process as a working backwards process. So really thinking from the customer first. And, I'm not just saying that, but we really use customer data to understand what kind of analytics, what kind of statistics would you really want to see in a Bundesliga match. So we ask them in regular surveys through our own and operated channels, amongst other questions, of course, what about match facts? What kind of additional information would you like to see on air or in our digital products? And from that, we create long lists. Obviously, sometimes we also provide them with ideas, because, you have to be creative in order to understand what you can do with lots of data points. So we also try to be creative and present them with ideas. And then we also share these ideas with our other customers, like our broadcasters and the commentators, the experts, sports experts, who are in the end, important so it's relevant for the clubs as well. And then we come up with short lists. And then one thing that's critical as well is that we have to do a feasibility check, because not everything is feasible. A lot of things is feasible, and much more is feasible than we thought it was back in 2020, actually. So that's great to see. And then we do short lists, and do with a couple of them, we do POCs, see how they perform actually. And from POC, we would then go into production if we see it works, and the story that we create around it is perfect, and then we go on and launch them.
That's really cool. And I know our next guest, Elif, is kind of the tech expert that's behind a lot of this stuff. She's going to give a little bit of a deeper insight into how exactly that works in terms of gathering the data and kind of producing it on the back end, which I'm excited for too. I've got one more question with you. I know we wanted to cover one more topic about kind of innovation within your league, but I want to give our viewers here a chance too over the next few minutes before Lucas has to leave. If you guys have any last minute questions for him, we can go ahead and drop those in the comments. We'll try to get to one or two after he and I wrap up our conversation, but I want to make sure everybody's got a chance to see that. So Lucas, something else that we've been talking about a lot is, obviously the Bundesliga and the DFL are kind of leading the charge in all these innovation spaces, right? You've got the glass to glass strategy that lets you innovate faster. You're doing all these match facts. They're kind of the first things for a lot of these different positions to look at these statistics, right? So you also mentioned to me that you will collaborate some with other leagues, potentially like MLS or other soccer leagues, pro soccer leagues, with this type of technology. And I was hoping you could go into detail on that because I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, happy to do so. And I think great example there is, first of all, as you said, we collaborate with a lot of leagues, and we collaborate, for example, also with Major League Soccer. And it's really great to see, first of all, how soccer, or as we say, football, is developing in the US. And so great to see that, especially with the World Cup being hosted jointly by US, Canada, and Mexico in 2026. So great to see that. And what we try to do as Bundesliga and through our partnerships, there's first of all a knowledge exchange, because first of all, we can also learn from other sport leagues. It's not like, DFL has invented everything. We try to be at the forefront, but this only comes with collaboration and knowledge exchange, I think.
Okay.
Through our joint venture, Sportech Solutions, who do the data gathering operations and analytics for Bundesliga and also for other entities like FIFA. We were also able to provide MLS now with official match data and actually use the same system that we built with AWS to create their next gen stats, I think it is called, with the MLS. And I think it's a fantastic story how we innovate together with AWS in the Bundesliga and then bring these innovations also to other leagues overseas. And so this is, I think, a pivotal example of how innovation should work in a perfect world.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you guys are basically, being the test subjects, trying to drive this, and then sharing that information then with other leagues to drive the game kind of as a total whole forward, right? You aren't just saving them for your league. You're trying to make every league a little bit better. And I think that's a really cool approach and a really cool model. So I'm excited to see this kind of stuff start popping up in MLS. One of my neighbors, I think, works for the Nashville soccer team. Been to a couple of those games, or football team. I'm getting roasted in the comments for calling it soccer, but I apologize. I'm American, but it's a very fun atmosphere, and I'm excited to see some of this stuff pop up. We're also getting some comments. I think they found our secret, Lucas. A lot of people think that we're brothers, apparently, that we look very much alike. That, I guess that's the thing too.
Now that they say it, I see it.
Yeah, I saw that pop up, and I was like, he's got better facial hair, but I guess other than that, we look kind of similar. All right, so as we're wrapping up your section here, before you say goodbye, is there anything that you want our viewers to walk away with thinking about the Bundesliga, thinking about DFL? Is there any major thing, like what's the main takeaway you want fans to think of when they think of innovation in the Bundesliga?
Well, think about that. We try to do it fan first and fan centric first. That we, always try when we innovate, we want to do it for the better of the product and of the fan. And I think that's in the end, in the long run, this is always the most important fact about it. And that's what we try to continue to do. And that's also what really unites us with AWS. And just keep your eyes open. We try to keep innovating and try to be at the forefront.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Lucas. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I think a lot of our viewers have as well. So I appreciate you taking the time. I know it's late over there. So
thank you very much. It was great to be part of the show. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Lucas. All right. Next up, we've got Elif Dogan from the AWS side. She's going to be talking about kind of the how behind the things that Lucas and I were talking about with MatchFacts, with how they're creating this remote broadcasting capability, that glass-to-glass business model. Before we get to Elif, I want to give a quick shout out to the survey in the comments. Debbie in the comments on Twitch and LinkedIn just dropped a link in. There we go. Take 5 minutes. Let us know how you're liking the show. Let us know what other topics or sports leagues you want us to cover in upcoming episodes. We're going to be on every Wednesday now. We're switching to Wednesdays starting September 20th. Every other Wednesday, we're going to be talking to a different league about how they use AWS to innovate in their game. So today we're talking to the Bundesliga and the DFL, the German pro soccer or football leagues, as I'm getting told a lot in the comments. We're going to be talking other leagues like NASCAR, the NFL coming up. So be sure to tune in every other Wednesday. Take this survey. You'll get $10 in AWS credits for completing it if you're one of the first 50 to do so. And let us know what you want us to explore in the future. All right. So without further ado, let me bring in Elif Dogan. She's our AWS tech expert in this area. So let's go ahead. What's going on, Elif? How are you?
I'm great. How are you? I heard a great session with Lucas. So yeah, super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've been really excited talking to you guys the last 2 weeks, prepping for this show, learning a lot more about how the Bundesliga and how the DFL are innovating in football and soccer. So I'm excited to talk to you kind of about how these things are getting done. Because I know whenever I watch pro sports and I see all these stats, I do think like how is that calculated really? Like, how do they know that probability of that pass going to that player or that keeper keeping the ball out? So I'm excited to dive into that. Before that, though, let's take a second and let our viewers know what your role is here at AWS. So it says sports lead for the DFL. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am part of AWS Professional Services Organization. It is the in-house consulting arm of AWS. So I lead the Bundesliga or DFL account at the moment, and I oversee multiple projects all the way from ideation to execution. So I work with various team members across AWS and bring the right resources to really work with Bundesliga teams, various Bundesliga teams to realize those innovation and bring them to life.
That's really cool. That's another, if it can't be in the league itself, it's cool to kind of be the liaison for the league, right? So that's another really cool sounding job. One of the things I was most excited for with starting this show was there are so many more opportunities in careers in sports that I didn't even know existed when I was in college. And I feel like if I did, I would have paid a lot more attention in comp sci classes and gotten into this. So, if you've got any college kids or young professionals out there watching, like there's so many open doors. If you're passionate about sports and you want to get involved in this, you can follow in Elif's footsteps and do some really cool things that really impacts fans for your sport. So before we get into all that, like I asked Lucas, I got to ask you, what made you want to get involved with the DFL, with football, with soccer? Is there any backstory there?
Yeah, absolutely. So growing up, I had two older brothers, and they always made me play soccer just to like the idea of like, oh, I'm going to be tougher. So I played soccer even when I was like 6 years old, 7 years old, without really knowing. So I'm super passionate about sports. I was an athlete and a part of my life. Then I played volleyball for a while. So sports was always part of my life. And when I saw this opportunity, I was part of the private equity. So I worked with private equity and their portfolio companies for a while.
Yeah.
And some of their portfolio companies were sport organizations. So I really enjoyed the industry. And I'm like, there is an opportunity here for me to get involved and join the sports team. And have been leading Bundesliga account, which is super, super happy about. I'm so lucky that it just kind of happened to be that way.
That's super cool. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. I think the main takeaway I want to take away from that is if Elif's brothers are watching, she said that she kind of kicked y'all's butts every day in the backyard playing soccer. So Elif is basically one step away from being in the Bundesliga herself, I think is basically what I got from that.
Maybe I wouldn't go that far.
But for those of you just joining us, we're joined by Elif Dogan. She is the tech expert behind a lot of the stuff happening with AWS and the Bundesliga when you're talking about match facts, the things you see on the screen, but also some of the stuff you see behind the scenes, things that you don't know are really impacted by the cloud, like the broadcasting itself and this glass-to-glass strategy that our last guest, Lucas, was talking about. So we're going to follow a similar trajectory with this conversation. I would love to talk to you about how that remote broadcasting works from our end, what exactly goes into that, because I know that's a big endeavor. And then we'll talk about how those match facts are gathered, the process of collecting the data and then turning that data within seconds, right, into something that we can see on screen as fans. So starting with that remote broadcast bit, Elif, how did that idea even come about and how did we make it happen?
Yeah, absolutely. And Lucas mentioned about the very unique setup that is DFL currently has is the glass-to-glass strategy. So capturing the camera signals all the way from stadium and producing content and distributing that across various channels like television, app, or web, and etc.
Yeah.
So that really allows us to innovate in various areas of those value chain that Lucas talked about briefly.
Yeah.
So about a year ago, we, Bundesliga and AWS together, we decided to look at what is the next level media production means for Bundesliga, for the league. And we got together using working backwards approach. We identify a few initiatives to look at future of media production.
What is that working backwards approach for maybe some people that don't know what exactly that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an Amazonian approach. That's what we use anything we do. So we always start with our customers. What does the end looks like? So imagine you're transporting back to 2025 and looking at your league, or in the case of remote production, how does that look like? Mm-hmm. And so we answer those questions and what we think that our customer wants and needs, and then we work backwards to solution that. Is it more flexible, more sustainable production, or whatever might be that those criteria? And we define that before we even start building anything. And working with Bundesliga, they really adopted that framework. So any projects or any initiative they really look at, they start thinking from their customer's perspective and they work backwards. And we have tools like press release, we call it PRFAQ. We create like a mock press release using that approach. Yeah. And that really communicates the vision. And so that's what we do.
Gotcha. Okay, so we're doing, sorry, I got you a little sidetracked there. So we're talking the glass-to-glass strategy, which for those of you that missed Lucas's overview of that, basically the DFL and the Bundesliga own the entire production process from beginning to end, which is very unique to their league. They own everything, and because they own everything, they're able to innovate a little bit faster. So with that glass-to-glass strategy, y'all started doing a working backwards for remote broadcasting, and that's where I interrupted you. So
no worries.
Continue from there.
Yeah, so we identify various initiatives around media production, but one of the key one was the cloud-based remote production, or sometimes it's called virtualized live remote production. So what that really is that you can produce, you don't have to bring all these equipments like trucks and staff that Lucas mentioned that needs to travel around to stadiums to produce live broadcast. You can actually do it in a remote location that can be done in anywhere on the cloud.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's really cool. I mean, for those of you on our side with American football, one of the famous stories is John Madden being afraid of flying, so he took a bus everywhere. So being able to, remote broadcast for all of these would be really, really cool. Because save a lot on emissions and kind of being a little bit greener, like Lucas mentioned, and also, saving some costs as well for the league side. So how did we make that happen exactly? So I know, like, as a consumer of everyday video call products, they drop all the time. So I'm sure there's a lot of stress to make sure that this remote broadcasting thing, won't have those issues. So how did we make it happen?
Yeah, great question. So, there are some quality standards that we had to target. So Bundesliga, they always and has been produced Bundesliga like highest quality broadcast. So that will always be the case for both Bundesliga 1 and Bundesliga 2. To meet with that highest quality standards in remote production, we took a workflow that was not tested before. So it didn't exist. It's the highest quality that is out there. So in February, we decided, okay, let's start with proof of concept. And that's the approach we take when we use the working backwards. We identify initiative, and then we look at, okay, what is the proof of concept looks like, so we can learn a lot before we commit to full production. So that's what we did. We did the proof of concept in February for one of the Bundesliga 2 games. Okay. The approach we took was a shadow production. So what that means, for those who are not familiar with the broadcasting production, there was a conventional production, which was the regular production that was ongoing, and we use a shadow production, install another like production control room that was running in parallel, but it was not broadcasted. It was purely on to do the proof of concept for that matter.
Okay.
So once we set that up, we decided that, okay, Bundesliga suggested that we do that in a remote location that are not in a regular broadcast center to really test the remoteness of it. And so we decided to do it in Hanover, one of their partners' offices. So we used the meeting room to set up this like production control rooms, if maybe you see it on TV or you saw it live, and brought the directors, operators, and audiovisual resources from who are actually going to produce the game. We also work with the partners who would be providing some of the software and tools that was needed to produce that game. So once we set up all that on the game day, the Bundesliga chose a provider where they were responsible of getting the signals from the stadium. The stadium was in Düsseldorf, and we use AWS Frankfurt region to bring the signals from Düsseldorf to Frankfurt. And to do that, we use provision AWS Direct Connect. So for those doesn't know what AWS Direct Connect is a dedicated network connectivity which provides shortest path to AWS resources. So that allows us to speed, that eliminates latency and helps us do better data connectivity. And then those signals were sent to AWS Elemental Media Connect, which is a high quality transport service for live video. So it delivers reliable and secure with the flexibility and agility of the cloud that we get. So once those signals were captured, then we distributed those to the production control room where directors and slow-mo operators and audiovisual mixers to really produce the game. So director is the one tells the story. They are the ones that gets decided which cameras or which angle they want to choose. That's what you see on the TV, right? It's being produced by that director. So all the processing, switching, routing, mixing, and producing was all done on AWS. It was a super successful event. We proved the viability of this highest broadcast quality. It was a first start for us, and there's a lot of more exciting projects and work to be done, which is coming up with DFL.
Yeah, and you know, what I thought was cool about it was I didn't notice as a fan that it's being remote broadcast, right? So I think that's probably the biggest success of all, is that there wasn't any difference. Like, we were able to cut costs, we're able to be a little bit greener, and we're able to keep that high production quality still. So I thought that was a really cool use case. I wanted to make sure we highlighted it and shouted out those services. You said it was Direct Connect and Elemental, right? So we can try to drop those links to those service pages in the chat here if people are curious about learning more. I also want to highlight on this channel, guys, if you subscribe to the AWS On Air channel overall, besides this show, we have shows about all of these other different services. So if you want to learn more about any of the tech that you're hearing about today and the stuff that's powering the Bundesliga, powering the DFL, and all these innovations, you should check out these other shows and check out some of these web pages to dive a little bit deeper into the tech side if you're interested in that. So also, we've got a lot of questions coming in. We'll try to get to them at the end of our conversation with Elif here, but I do encourage everybody in the comments, if you have questions about some of the stuff we're talking about, please drop them in the chat and we will try to get to as many as we can. So it looks, Elif, like everybody's clamoring for how these match facts are done. And it has always been something that's interested me a ton, both because, you know, it impacts my ability as a fan. We had a customer mention in the comments, like, might help him with some sports betting, which I thought was pretty funny. Fantasy leagues, all of this stuff that as fans make the game more interactive. So jumping into that, how do we come up with those stats? Lucas touched on this, where you kind of talk to customers, talk to broadcasters. Can you go into that process from our end too, about how do we start to create these stats and think of ways to execute them?
Yeah, so we definitely are part of that process that Lucas described. So we start getting involved in the ideation process where we work with Bundesliga while they bring the broadcast expert commentators and ex-football players or club representatives and really or football experts in to really throw all these ideas and also fans based on fan input. Once we discuss each and every of those ideas, then we vote at the end of that process. We internally first do the initial voting, and we select about five, we meaning that collective group of people. And we select 5 to 7 ideas that we think everybody basically votes. And then once those are selected, we send Bundesliga surveys their fans to see which are the top 2 that fans are most interested in. And that's how we start.
Gotcha. So basically you guys is kind of a collective group. Bundesliga, AWS comes together and says, we think these 7-ish could be really cool. And then you actually ask the fans directly what they would want to see, which I think is super cool. I've never gotten an email from any league asking my opinion, but I think that's cool that you get the fans' opinions, whittle it down to about 2. And then are those 2 what you move forward with? You just start at that point thinking, how do we execute these? How do we make these a reality? What's the next step?
Yeah, so once we identify 2, then we start looking at, do we have enough data collection? We need to collect data, right? We need to have data to create these statistics. So do we have the relevant data and what parameters that we need to look into? So we partner with Bundesliga and work with Bundesliga data teams. I think Lucas mentioned earlier Sportech Solutions. So that we work with them to create a proof of concept that shows the viability of that, and we take it from there. So the whole process of identifying or fan choosing stats, which is all the way to production, which takes about 6 months to build the stats. Yeah.
Gotcha. That's actually faster than I would have thought. So the thing I'm most curious about, and I've always wondered with all these pro leagues, is how the heck do you guys gather all this information? Or like players wearing sensors in their boots or something? Is there like a chest piece like Iron Man that they're running around with? Like how do you get this data? How is that collected?
Yeah, I get this question all the time. I think that's what everybody assumes, that there are sensors just constantly collecting data and sending it to AWS. But actually, we don't use sensors. We use cameras that are located in the stadium. And there are also some manual data collection. So people usually surprised when I say that. So what do you mean, like you collect data?
I 1000% thought it was either sensors on the player or you guys somehow implanted them under the grass. So I was clearly way off the mark. How many cameras are we talking about here? If I go to a stadium for the Bundesliga, am I looking around and there's just an entire ring of cameras around the stadium?
Yes. So, I mean, we do have, you can certainly see those cameras. Those are like, we have about 16 to 20 cameras for all Bundesliga 1 and 2 stadiums. And those cameras are not the cameras that does the broadcast, right? So that's different. These cameras were located in the stadium to collect data based for the position of the players. So that's strategically located.
Gotcha. Okay. So you've got the cameras collecting data. You also said there's a manual part to it, which surprises me. So do we have people watching the football match that are just like manually typing stuff the whole time, coding in 0s and 1s? What are they doing?
Yeah, great question. So we do have 2 types of data in football in general, generally speaking. So the one that we were just talking about collecting with cameras is the positional data. So that kind of data, cameras send what we call it using computer vision, what we call the position packages. So that includes all positions of the players, which is pretty much 25 times per second. So that data is fed per second onto our environment, AWS. When you do the math, it's about 3.6 million data points we collect per game. And the second one we talk about is the event data. So event data is often still captured manually by operators. So you'll see people in the stadium where they collect data of the events that are happening that we are not collecting through the positional data.
Gotcha. So what are some examples of that kind of data? It's like each one. So we've got the 3 million collected by the auto cameras. We've got maybe a couple thousand, I guess, collected manually. What kind of breaks into each one of those buckets?
Yeah. So, sometimes when you watch the game, there are certain events that you have to be right 100% of the time. So identification of goal, right? Pretty straightforward.
I think Lucas behind him had a poster of that famous Germany versus England. Is it a goal? Is it not a goal? Right on the line there. So useful. We're trying to fix those issues.
Yeah, exactly. We could have a better prediction if it was happening today. But I think it's really you just can't be like calling the goals incorrectly, right? Or like penalties, or so those data needs to be captured like 100% right. So in the past, those were manually captured in an Excel sheet, or just like a very manual process. But today, we actually have those operators have like a game console where if there's a goal, they press X, or if there's a corner kick, they press square, or whatever it might be.
They're playing video games off on the side. I want that job. What is that job?
Yeah, I mean that's what, like, if you go to Bundesliga game and if you see those operators, like, don't think that they're playing a game. They're actually collecting data, and they're very busy with doing that. So, and one of the reasons why we do this is, like, as going back to, we have to be 100% right, and there's no AI tools at the moment that can automatically capture. However, we're improving this process. How can we automate as much as possible? So that's where we move from Excel to now gaming console, but there are other initiatives that might happen in the past. So we collect about 1,600 data points per game that are manually captured.
Gotcha. So basically, to kind of summarize everything for everybody, if I'm following correctly, we've got the cameras to capture like 3 million data points per game. They're doing a lot of the automatic stuff, just looking at player positioning, that sort of thing. And then we've got the dream job people playing video games in real life, collecting like 1,600 data points per game that are doing kind of the critical things. So marking goals, corner kicks, other things, just to make sure the most critical pieces of the match are correct. Is that a good summary?
Perfect.
Perfect. So let's get into then how, I know that data is shown instantly, right? And we obviously, in order to train those 3 million data points and get them correct, there's going to be some probably, I would assume, AI stuff involved with training models to interpret data correctly. Can you take us through, first off, how quickly does this process happen? So we collect the data, how quickly can we see it on screen?
Yeah, so when we are talking about broadcast, we only have 2 to 5 seconds to really tell the story of that stat. So we capture those data only when we start combining these data. We start to really understand the match. Depending on the match fact that we build, of course, we look at different components of the data and the parameters. So not just looking at the players on the ball, but gaining ability to understand how teams are positioning during the attack, or corner kicks, or at the time of shot, or which direction the teams are attacking. So once we get those data, the combined data, those arrive into, so let me just back up. BMFs, bigger match facts, are actually created in a serverless architecture. So once we get this data, they come into the serverless compute engine for containers called AWS Fargate. So,
real quick, so it goes, the data is collected, I assume, in like a data lake, right? And then gets exported to Fargate. And that's where we're at. So data is collected, data is, I guess, seen by the cameras, collected in a data lake, and then sent to Fargate. Is that where we're at in the process so far?
Yeah, so we are at the Fargate, which we, yes.
So what is Fargate? And we'll for everybody watching, we'll drop these links in too if you're curious, like I am, what these services are. Despite working at AWS, I don't actually know what some of this stuff is. What is Fargate?
Yeah, so it is a serverless compute engine that basically lets you focus on just building application. You don't have to manage servers, so there's no servers. We basically bring all this data.
Okay.
And Fargate uses the positions and directions of each player to run the machine learning models.
Gotcha.
So that's the step one. Obviously, some of the for the disclaimer, we have a lot of match packs, and some of the architectures are more complex. So I'm really keeping it very basic for audience to really follow us along.
You're keeping it simple for me. I think our audience is probably further along. So we have Fargate. It's starting to interpret that data. What happens next?
Yes. So then we collect millions of data, and now we need to produce insights from those data. And of course, we do need a machine learning, which in this case, we use Amazon MSK.
Okay. So what does that stand for?
So it is a fully managed Apache Kafka service. So it's basically makes it easier to ingest and process streaming data in real time. So,
gotcha. Okay. Okay. So we've collected the data. Well, cameras see the data. We collect that data in a data lake. It's exported to Fargate, correct, to start kind of interpreting it, making sure it's sent correctly. And then it goes to, what was this last one again? MSK, in order to start the process of turning that into a stat. So what happens from that point?
Yeah, we also use Amazon SageMaker, which allows us to conveniently do all of the necessary steps that needs to produce the whole stats, right, or the output. So it basically covers the whole ML lifecycle from all the way from data preparation to model deployment and management. So for those who's curious about Amazon SageMaker, it is the fully managed service that enables us quickly and easily integrate machine learning based models into our applications.
Gotcha. I knew there was going to be something with machine learning or AI in this process. So it goes data lake to Fargate to MSK, and then SageMaker is the thing that actually determines what these stats are. That's where the kind of thinking happens.
Yeah. And then we start training models, right? So we need to look at the models, look at the data based on those match facts that we are producing. We need to start training the models. And after we basically train our initial model, we need to look at the viability, or are there any bias, or what is do we have the stats that are we don't only spot check, so like go back to historical data, but we also manually single prediction sense checking, what we call it. So like, is it really happening? So let me give you an example. It's a funny story. Okay. When we built the speed alert, which is a very popular match fact. Actually, sometimes the players also post on their, like if they have like a high speed alert, they also like share that data. We are looking at the data, and there's this player that is coming up that we couldn't identify. So it doesn't belong either team when we look at the data. So we're like looking and trying to figure out based on the metadata that we have. And we went back and watched the footage in the game, and then we identified it was a referee. So,
oh, man, okay.
We eliminated, of course, excluded, I shouldn't say, referee from those stats, and while we were building it. So it was a very interesting.
Maybe that referee should have been signed. I don't know. He's running everybody. Props to that guy.
Yes, absolutely. So sometimes you have to do the manual spot checking. And
gotcha.
after...
I was going to say, so basically, when we're creating these models to interpret this data for the Bundesliga, we kind of do it on the back end, but also as we're starting to put it out there, we manually check it still. So like, we don't just write up the code and send it. I assume we partner with the Bundesliga and the DFL and trying to figure out what all these probabilities are, what these speeds are, and then how long is that kind of beta period where we're still testing it, or is it kind of a, still ongoing process for every stat to make sure that they're kept accurate?
Yeah, so we definitely have interaction throughout the whole development lifecycle, but I think the most interaction really comes in the proof of concept phase. So we really, as we are training our initial models and looking at the data, really collecting that feedback, that includes like, for example, when we built the X goals or the goal probability, we looked at more than 40,000 shots to train our model, and we still keep updating as the data comes in. So as we are really training those models, we also present that as part of the process of building proof of concept to the experts in the field. And we showcase, okay, this is the data points or parameters that we use, and kind of that they are part of the process of prediction or sense checking on the manual feedback that we do. And we collectively discuss if it's successful proof of concept as a result or not.
Gotcha. So that's, I have enjoyed this kind of detailed look at it. So to kind of summarize for everybody, because I know we're still getting some new viewers coming in. So these match facts we see for the DFL and the Bundesliga for football matches, it's a 6-month process from ideation to the initial rollout of like, let's figure out how to get this done, where we whittle it down from 7 stats that AWS and the DFL think these might be cool. We ask customers and fans what they actually want to see. So something like keeper efficiency or these speed alerts. Then we start training these models to execute them. And the whole thing, we use, I think, 5 services I counted, right? So we get cameras at the stadium, both automatic and manual, to get like 3 million data points. Those data points are sent to a data lake, which is basically just a storage thing for cloud computing, then sent to Fargate, then sent to MSK to start the interpretation. Then Amazon SageMaker comes in, which is our machine learning end-to-end platform, interprets those things, sends them back then to the league. And all of that takes place in 2.5 seconds for these stats to be presented.
I mean, you in some cases is longer, but it's like between 2 to 5 seconds really in the broadcast, like live broadcast, someone to tell the story. Some stats are much faster than the others. Like, can't really tell exactly how many seconds because we have so many match facts and they definitely have different.
The fact that they're even counted in seconds, though, is just insane to me with all that process behind the scenes. So if y'all are curious about some of the tech behind that, if you want to dive more into those services we just mentioned, Debbie in the comments here is dropping those links in. But then the final step of that process then, right, is the visuals itself for the broadcast. So we've created the stat in those couple of seconds. Obviously, we want to get it to fans to be able to visualize and interact with the game. We also want to get it to the broadcasters to be able to show and inform the fans on kind of the probability of what they just saw, right? So what is the final step of that process look like to produce the visuals themselves?
Yeah. So because of the time, we only have a few seconds to really, in some cases, to show those statistics and tell the story once the insights are available. We work with graphic designers at DFL and to create couple of designs. We also do that in the kind of the initial phase of the proof of concept. We also look at, during the proof of concept, we also look at like multiple designs, what we may be relevant. And we get, again, feedback from the experts who were also part of the process that we've been talking about. So those approved, so we came up with a couple designs, and once the approved designs by multiple parties that are involved in the process, then they need to be integrated. So we use graphic engine of choice of the league, and they create graphics packages. So there's a graphics operator who then decides when those graphics can be shown, those statistics, and how they can be integrated in the game. So sometimes these are actually, there are 3 ways to really just think about this. So sometimes it's really depending on those graphs, when do we show in specific data points or the match facts, they're linked to the time slot. So it's like first half, second half, or 70th minute of the game, and etc. And sometimes they're linked to an event. So if there's a goal or there's a free kick or whatever it might be, then they're linked to an event. And then it's also editorial decisions. Sometimes director is telling a story because they have to be relevant, right? So you can't just put a random matchback on the screen that is covering like half of the screens while director is trying to replay a shot or something. So it is a coordinated effort by those graphic operators, and based on that expert view and the story that is being told by the director, they are built editorially. So, and
Gotcha.
the data that is available for the analysis.
Awesome. That's really cool. Like, I've loved hearing you talk about this. I could listen to it for a long time. I know we're wrapping up, though. I wanted to get to some of these customer questions, answer them as best we can. First one up, the match facts definitely available to fans and teams. Like Elif was saying, it's a matter of seconds before they're available. And Lucas highlighted in his segment 30 minutes ago that like teams can look at these at halftime. They can look at them in game and kind of maybe help inform their decisions on how to adjust going forward. This gentleman, Kraken, first off, shout out to that name. Super cool. So he's saying starting as a software engineer, starting as somebody in maybe cloud computing in general, what are some activities that they could do with soccer? What are some things maybe that you would recommend them to look into to start doing some of the stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, great question. And so, you know, we have great partnerships in general in sports, and Bundesliga is definitely one of my favorite, and I'm not biased. But all jokes aside, we have great partnership with a lot of amazing sports organizations. And one thing that I recommend, we have sports page. Go check that one out and see what kind of solutions we built across multiple sports and there are super interesting stories. We do have recorded sessions. We had one, I presented one in AWS Berlin Summit, for example, available on YouTube. But our YouTube channel is great for that. You can actually go and watch some of the pre-recorded, or not pre-recorded, recorded summits, or you know, the reinvent sessions. But also one more thing that I would like to mention is that blog post. So we publish all the match facts that we built. We built so far 14 match facts with DFL. And they all have blog posts that you can access. What are the technology, how we built them, the architecture behind it. We share that publicly, and it's great resources if you want to just start understanding.
Gotcha. All right, and we can drop a link to, there's a general AWS Sports Bundesliga page. That's a great starting point for those of you that want to look into some of that stuff Elif was just mentioning. We'll go ahead and drop that link in the chat here in a sec. Then one last question here, Elif, regarding what we were talking about with the data. People are wondering, is it AWS collecting the data? Does Bundesliga directly capture the data? What's the person or the company or entity, whatever that word is this morning, that captures the data to create these match facts?
So we work with, short answer is AWS does not collect the data. We use the collected data, and Sportix Solution, who's the data arm of Bundesliga, they are the ones that are collecting data using, they work with other providers, but they are the ones that are actually collecting the data. So they're responsible of getting those data from the stadium and bringing it onto AWS.
All right. Well, we're wrapping up here, Elif. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Is there anything, main point you want customers or our fans here to walk away with from your session?
Yeah, I mean, I think just like when you're watching a game next time, even if in the stadium, you can actually use your app, Bundesliga app I can speak for Bundesliga, to actually see those stats. It's a lot of fun if you watch the game on TV, like thinking about what is the probability of that next goal. I play games sometimes, and about 50% of time, I'm wrong, but I don't know if it's the luck or based on the data that I know, but my fans are usually a lot higher. So I think it's a lot of fun. You can really gamify that, but highly recommend checking out and looking at that. Hope everyone understands what goes behind it, at least to make those stats happening.
Perfect. Thanks so much for that summary. I'm definitely going to check out that app. Elif Dogan, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. That was a really fun conversation about what the technology is that powers all these match facts for us as fans watching the DFL and Bundesliga. So thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, that is the end of our show. If you haven't already, please go ahead and take our survey. We'll drop another link to it here in the chat in a second. Basically, it takes less than 5 minutes. If you're one of the first 50 respondents, you'll get $10 in free AWS credits. Maybe try out some of these services we were talking about today. It also will let you tell us what kind of leagues and storylines you want us to follow on this show. Again, this is AWS On Air Sports. We will air starting September 20th, every other Wednesday. So we're moving to Wednesdays for the rest of the year. And every other Wednesday, we'll be talking to a different pro sports league. Next Wednesday, the 20th, we're going to be talking to NASCAR about how they're innovating in their game with some of the cameras and fan interactions they have with their cars and capturing that data. You know, going 200 miles an hour, some of the fastest sport, one of the fastest sport in the world, and how they're able to bring that in new and exciting ways to their fans and their drivers. So be sure to set your calendars for that coming up on September 20th. Thank you for joining us today. My name's Nick, and I hope you enjoyed our show.